Hey guys, this is John, and welcome to another standard video. I'm playing Randika Lakmal, rated 2102. This is a 15 plus 15 game. And let me adjust my webcam here slightly. Sorry about that. I was tweaking my setup right before I went live. Okay, so C5. Let's tell my opponent good luck. They know they're going to be on YouTube. All right, so Sicilian. I played an Alapin recently. I'm kind of in the mood to play an open Sicilian, so let's go ahead and play knight f3. But Alapin is my principal recommendation for those of you below 2,000. All right, knight c6. So the Roslimo is pretty popular these days. I don't play Roslimo. I'm going to go d4. I know some of the Roslimo lines, but I'm much more familiar with this. And we get a accelerated dragon. Okay, so g6. Now, the Maroczy bind with c4 is, at the highest level, the most popular approach here, it seems to me. But let's play knight c3, keeping this in true open Sicilian spirit. Defend the knight on d4. Play bishop c4. I'll try to play these moves relatively quickly. This is a famous theoretical position. Black is threatening knight takes e4, going for a fork here, the center fork trick. So we want to play bishop b3 so that this is ineffective for black. It's not working. It won't be a pawn fork when black ultimately gets to the position after d5, which I'm sure my opponent will not play because they're 2100. So there's a relatively famous game of Bobby Fischer's here where his opponent played knight a5, allowing e5. And then after knight e8, the move bishop takes f7. Yeah, bishop takes f7, which is basically a winning move. I think it was Fischer-Reshevsky. I want to say Reshevsky was an opponent like 1957 or something like that. Does that sound right? Doesn't quite sound right that it was Reshevsky. But anyways, I'll link it below. The normal things to do here for black are d6, kind of taking it into normal dragon territory, or this move a5. Yes, this move a5 is completely playable. Interesting line. I actually looked at this somewhat recently. That's a typical thing chess players say, right? Like, I looked at this recently. I played against this over the board, although it's been probably 15 years. So, okay, f3 is a major line here. You can try to react to a5 with a4, but that is probably a net gain for black because they gain the use of the b4 square, which could be more useful than white's b5 square. So I think I'm going to go for the f3 line. Either that or I could castle and allow a4. And the subsequent theory there, knight takes a4, knight takes e4, knight b5. I have played that position too. Yeah, actually, maybe I will go for that one because I remember that one scoring pretty well for white, and I think the engine likes it too. Now, not that you should be overly influenced by what you think the engine will like or what you remember that the engine likes, but it's been a while since I've been in this position, even though I've looked at it. So I'm just trying to recall my conclusions before I make a move here. But yeah, this is ultimately a deflection attempt. Black is looking to play the pawn to a4 and ideally get at the e4 square. So yeah, I think I may castle a4, knight takes a4, knight takes e4, and then this move knight b5, which threatens bishop b6. Leads to an interesting position. Let's go ahead and do it. Black seems booked up so far. So this should be a good fight. We're working out of the snowstorm here in Minnesota. We did get a bunch of snow, like 16 inches or something like that, which was actually a little less than we thought we'd get. But I have not been outside very much, just staying indoors, teaching and recording chess content. What's not to love? So a4, knight takes a4, knight takes e4, knight b5, threatening bishop b6. I think rook a6 is the move at that point. But let's see. Yeah, I think knight b5, rook a6, and then c3, blocking the influence of the bishop here. Now, I remember when I first saw this line, it struck me as a little odd because usually when white has given up the e pawn in a Sicilian and black has two center pawns against none, that's to black's favor. But remember, this b pawn is isolated. Black's whole queen side is a little gummed up. They got to constantly watch the b6 square. So white has a pretty good claim to various potential weaknesses in black's position, especially weak squares. So I do think white's activity can make up for the loss of the center pawn for a flank pawn, the trade. Also trying to remember if I put the pawn on c4. Somehow that seems familiar too, but let's first and foremost see how black reacts in this position. Yeah, I am pretty sure the move is rook a6 here, but after that, my knowledge of this line gets fuzzy. What alternatives would make sense here? Maybe d6, looking for bishop b6 and then moving the queen out. But I also have knight b6 as an option against that. Don't get the sense that black's going to want to give me the b6 square to work with at all. So I would anticipate rook a6. So I'm trying to spend my time right now figuring out if it's c3 or c4. So I somehow remember elements of both. Also, my queen is probably going to come to e2, and I can post a rook on d1, ideally opposite black's queen. Yeah, if I play c4, it blocks my light square bishop, but it does allow one of the knights to return to c3 if they want. Clings to the center a little bit more. So I'm glad that black is thinking now, because had black just dashed out rook a6, I would be the one thinking. So I'm trying to think on my opponent's time. Yeah, rook a6, c4, knight a5, though. How do I feel about that position? I'm not sure. Attacking the bishop and the pawn. I guess I could go bishop c2 and hit the knight on e4. If I play c3, I could just make those developing moves I was mentioning. Queen e2, rook fd1. I also don't see why I couldn't play queen e2 right away and just leave the c-pawn decision till later. I mean, maybe there's d5, but I think rook fd1 again is looking good. So those are probably going to be my candidate moves, assuming rook a6. Don't think I have to play f3 to kick the knight away. This knight could be a liability in the center, so I don't want to shove it away quite yet. It's an undefended piece. Let's not try to weaken our king on this diagonal if I don't have to. Yeah, I can't get the c4 idea out of my head. So I think that has something to do with how you want to play this line. And this is such a common dilemma in the opening. When you're playing a line that looks familiar, you might even remember having looked at it at some point, and there's various ideas swirling around in your head. And it's tough. I don't have a silver bullet solution for you guys. Like in this situation, you should definitely stick to your instincts, or you should definitely play the move that looks familiar in the variation. Probably not so much of the latter, like usually following rote rules is going to get you in trouble if the position is not exactly what's in your prep. So I think we can categorically say, like, that's bad advice just to follow that. Your instincts should always prevail, and what you see and calculate in the moment should always take priority. But it is hard when you know that there are themes in the position, you know that there are things that you've studied, you have to reconcile that with the position unique to you on board. I think most anyone who's studied openings will experience that at some point and grapple with that dilemma. So, yeah, I'm just really happy my opponent's thinking a lot here. I still haven't made up my mind. In the long run, white would like to unlock this 3 versus black's 1. It's a lame majority right now, but both sides have somewhat hard time activating their majority is kind of the thing. If black starts moving the D and E pawns up the board, it's possible that they could become exposed down the 2 center files. Or maybe if this pawn goes to D6 and this one comes to E5, the pawn on D6 is backwards. All sorts of implications like that. So this could be a little slow moving for the pawn action to start. Wow, and black plays rook takes A4. So this is exactly what I'm talking about, guys. Like, I'm glad I didn't tank on playing knight b5 on the previous move, sweating what I was going to do on the next move, right? Okay, I got to take here. I think there's little doubt about that. Now, I guess black's idea is going to be to swipe this pawn. But how much compensation does that really offer? Queen a5. Okay, so, I mean, I glanced at this, but I didn't think this was going to be anything I couldn't handle. Like if I play c3 here, which allows my queen to defend the bishop in turn defending the knight. So this seems like an awfully optimistic exchange sacrifice. My opponent knows they're on YouTube or will be on YouTube, so maybe they're going for it. I respect it. But yeah, I don't think this is a sound sacrifice. So c3, not too many other moves I would really consider here. I mean, c4 allows bishop takes b2, so I'd prefer to keep my pawn if I can. Is there any idea I'm missing? I don't really see what it would be. Black can't go knight c5 because I have my bishop covering here. c3 allows me to play b4 if I want to shove the queen away. So let's play it and see what black has in mind against this move. I think it is likely black might have missed this. Otherwise, they probably would have played bishop takes b2, at least try to get a pawn for the exchange. And look at this. One of the only games in recent memory where I'm up several minutes on the clock. This should have been using the clock as a weapon game. Shout out to Randika, by the way, for being a Lee Chess patron. That's great to see. Supporting Lee Chess. Get the little wings next to your name. And you feel good in the process. You support a great site. Yeah, so I think high time black tries to develop this light square bishop, so d6, let's say. And then my only concern in the short term is just how to extricate the bishop and the knight. It's not like they're even attacked yet, but if d6 is played, I think I have to start planning for black going bishop d7 and maybe moving this knight and trying to take aim against the knight on b5, which in turn makes the bishop on a4 shaky. So no reason whatsoever to panic. Again, I always have this b4 idea to kick the black queen, but I will start planning for that possibility. One thing I see is I can maybe move my bishop away and attack this knight, but I probably lose a pawn in the process, like knight takes f2 in between move, and then black can scoop the knight on b5. It'd be ideal if my pawn could come to a4 to support the knight. That would be a nice situation. So I'm thinking, let's say d6, I play b4. If black goes queen a6, maybe I do a little maneuver with the knight c7. Yeah, hit the queen. Oh, wow. And the queen would actually be trapped in that case. I was kind of assuming the queen had a square to go to, but that could be a threat in many instances. For example, yeah, if black plays rook d8, that might also come into play. b4, and on the innocent queen a6, knight c7. Look at that. As the knight controls a8, my bishop controls a7 and b6. The pawn on b4 will control a5, and the bishop on a4 is defended by the queen still. The bishop's defending the knight. So, bizarre queen trap. Could come to pass, though. Yep, d6. And I might play b4 kind of quickly here. My opponent's taking their time, so I think they're going to start feeling the heat of the clock. b4 just looks like a good move, too. I don't see any tactical issues with it. Kind of weakens c3, but I don't really see what black's going to do to capitalize on that yet. I have this knight rotation to d5 if I want it. I have moves like rook c1. Yeah, let's play it. Let's try to push black a little bit here. Maybe catch them attempting to keep an eye on both these pieces and running into knight c7. So I think black needs to play queen a8 or queen d8, neither of which I would think black is thrilled to play. But has to be done, I believe. You could argue I'm playing a little bit of hope chess here, but I was thinking about the position while black was considering their options, and b4 looks pretty good. And again, I do want to activate this 3 versus 1 at some point. I want to extricate my bishop and knight. So I think all systems go for this move. Everything I've looked at indicates that this is helpful for me. And also it has a nice trap associated with it. That's the side benefit. The best type of traps in chess are the ones where you're just playing a strong move, and the trap is a consequence of one of your opponent's mistakes. You're not solely relying on the efficacy of the trap. Okay, so black has not played queen a6. Now, remember, I was in a situation like this in a standard game recently where I commented that the longer they think, in my opinion, the less likely they blunder a lot of times. But that depends on the position. If the threat is obvious, I tend to think that way. I don't know how obvious knight c7 is after queen a6. So I'm going to assume black's going to play queen a8. That's my prediction. And if that's played, one move I had in mind was rook c1. Okay, queen a6 played. Oh, this is not a trap with the queen. Yeah, it's not a trap. Black has c4. Yeah, black has that one. I also probably should have calculated knight takes c3. But mainly black has queen c4, which I'm sure many of you in the comments saw. It still looks kind of sketchy for the queen, so maybe I can prepare to take away c4. Yeah, I did that nice job like circling all the squares and indicating where black's queen couldn't go, but there is one square, which will become available when I move the knight. But we can build off of this. I haven't played knight c7, so we can build off this. I'm still looking at it. Knight c7, queen c4, but I think c3 is a little bit too weak to justify going for that. I mean, I'm vaguely looking at like knight c7, queen c4, bishop b3, queen takes c3, rook c1, queen takes b4, knight b5. Some extremely roundabout way to attack the queen. Not quite seeing a trap there. Yeah, I might want to play this rook c1 move. That may be the move. Yeah, let's do it. I was going to play this anyways against the queen a8, queen d8 options. And of course, I'm disappointed that I miscalculated and that this is not actually a queen trap. But again, it looks a little precarious for black, and maybe I can build off of it. Yeah, knight c7 here. I guess there's bishop b5, bishop b3 too, but I don't... If that pawn on c3 drops, it's going to be very hard to trap their queen. There's too many options, so I think I need to reinforce this pawn. Neverness, man. Where are you in the chat? We have an NM watching, but not Neverness. Neverness has become a celebrity in the comments section on YouTube. If you're lucky enough to witness a Neverness sighting, you've made your week. Possibly your entire month or year. I like how that NM immediately left after I mentioned that they were watching. This is not live, by the way. This is locally recorded. All right, bishop d7. Yeah, and now can I pull off my intended idea? I think it might work now, guys. Knight c7. All right, so similar problems. Black can't retreat the queen anywhere. All these squares are covered. Nor can they go to d3 or e2. So I think that queen c4 move is the only option. And then what if I just play bishop b3? simply bishop b3. I think the queen is trapped at that point. I was overconfident before and missed the c4 square, but I think the queen is trapped there. Can't go backwards to a6 or b5, covered by the knight. Can't retreat on this diagonal. There's knight takes c3. Bishop takes c4, knight takes d1. I think that's about the best that black's going to do, though. And I see some simplifications. The knights come off the board in a line like that, which I think should be helpful in converting. The best I see for black is getting into some ending where they have 2 pawns for the rook. That's the best I see. Okay, so knight c7, we do have to look at knight takes c3. I should mention this move, because if knight takes a6, knight takes d1, there's multiple pieces hanging. That may not even be better for me. But knight c7, knight takes c3, I can play rook takes c3. Very important. So that should defeat that in-between move. So I'm really focusing on this position right now, looking for any way black can mess me up there, because if this works, it's going to win the game. But if I miss something, it could get messy. No real discovery from this knight either. My queen is safe. Yeah, I think it's going to go knight c7, queen c4, bishop b3, knight takes c3, bishop takes c4, knight takes d1, rook f takes d1, knight takes b4, and then dealer's choice for me. I was thinking knight d5 at that point to swap the remaining knight pair. Probably rook b1 is also good. Yeah, black has 2 pawns for the piece at that point, but that's it. 2 pawns for the rook, I should specify. Well, 3 minor pieces each, and I'll have an extra rook. I've got time. This is nice. I have a little time to spare. I'm seeing no issues. I'm seeing no other lines that are tempting. There's lots of routine ways I can play this, but let's go for it, folks. Knight c7. Into the breach. I kind of mentioned that when I went into this whole line with knight takes a4, knight b5, that the squares on the queen side are a little tender for black. So we'll take a look at the theory afterwards. I'm going to be really curious just to improve my knowledge of this line, which was sketchy at best after the position we got in the game. I wonder if knight c7 was on black's radar the whole time, and they did see that they had queen c4, or if they've been missing this move for the last couple moves. I'd be curious. And of course, Randika, if you happen to watch this game, please let us know your thoughts in the comments if you're willing to give them. I love to hear from opponents. That's one of the nice things about these videos, is I think they lead to a lot of good community discussion. We're all trying to get better. And I've had a lot of opponents over the years like show up in the comments and write a paragraph or a few sentences about what they were thinking or feeling during the games. Okay, and black's time is getting very low here. The position's not looking good. Black needs something huge to have any chance here, but don't see it transpiring. Yeah, knight takes c3. I think I'll just take with the rook as planned. I don't see that move changing anything. Black can take on f1, I guess. But let's see. Queen takes f1 might be the best move because the queen is still trapped. Yep, queen takes f1. All right, let's just pause for a moment because we're getting kind of a weird material imbalance. This is going to be queen versus rook. Black will have a rook and 1 pawn against my queen is the imbalance. I think I see a pretty nice way to simplify this one too. So king takes f1, bishop takes c3, back the knight out to d5, hit the bishop on c3. If bishop takes b4, black loses a piece, knight takes b4, bishop takes d7, among other things. So I'm thinking on knight d5, black might retreat the bishop all the way to g7, but then I can play bishop takes c6, followed by knight takes e7, or even b5. I only have 2 legal moves. I don't see a super compelling reason to play queen takes f1. I also don't see why king takes f1 would be dangerous for me, so let's do it. I'm exposing myself on this diagonal here, but can't imagine that's going to be much of a problem. Yeah, so looking at this knight d5 move, I like it. Just a satisfying move to play. Black could go to the f6 square with the bishop and try to anchor this pawn, but I can always take on f6 and then scoop on d6. And the lack of a dark square bishop's really going to hurt around black's king, too. So I think we should have this one in the can, as Daniel Narditsky would say. He's fond of that expression. What does that refer to, actually? Does that mean, like, coffee can? You guys know, like, if you collect change, loose change, people often put it in a coffee can. I know I did that for a long time. Is that what the reference is? But hopefully I can put this one in the can. Not a whole lot else to calculate here. That bishop's under attack. It has to move. And with e7 collapsing, I think black's not going to last too long. Because once you lose e7, you're almost certainly going to lose d6 too. Black could maybe play bishop e5 here, looking to hold d6, but I have f4 if I want it. Might make use of that move. No counterattack is going to work here. Rook a8, just way too slow to set anything up. The time for taking advantage of this diagonal is long past, if that was ever a possibility for black. So while I feel good about the result of this game, I don't think I had to make any truly difficult decision in this game. And missing the whole queen c4 thing was sloppy on my part because b4, it was a somewhat committal move. I don't think I would play that position differently if I saw queen c4, just thinking about it now. But I did get a little fortunate that the whole plan was still pretty strong, and I still had some auxiliary ideas of trapping the black queen as occurred in the game, right? Then again, and I always like to audit my decision-making process and try to be as honest as possible about it. I did kind of mention that when I was deciding whether to play b4, it just looked like a good move. It looked like a useful move. And I was talking at length about how the trap was like a side benefit. And I was expecting black to play queen a8 or queen d8. So, yeah, I'm mostly disappointed that I missed the queen c4 move initially. But ultimately, I don't think it affects the evaluation much. And the only other thing is I wish I would have known the theory in this line a bit better. Assuming black had played rook a6. It was getting murky for me. Would have been nice to have a little more knowledge there. If I was playing this line in a tournament game, I would definitely want to have more knowledge from that point. Okay, bishop e5 played. So do I go f4 or do I take c6 or even play b5? b5 also a tempting move. Maybe bishop h6, but I don't think I should give black a reason to defend the pawn. Black's very low on the clock at this point too, so let's keep that in mind. I think f4 should be sufficient here. There is e6 as a counterattack, but I see now it runs into knight b6. So, yeah, I'm thinking f4 is probably the way to go. Yeah, let's play it. Keep the pressure on my opponent. Black could probably argue this is a slight beneficial inclusion for them, like f4, assuming they go back to g7 or something. Because at least I can't play like bishop h6 at some stage. And my king is a little more loose. But we're really splitting hairs here. And realistically, white is winning comfortably. right, final seconds for black. Plays bishop g7. So bishop takes c6. Good default move here. I got to assume pawn takes against that because I think bishop takes, knight takes e7, take c6, take d6. Too easy. That wins the house. So pawn takes c6 is the only thing keeping some play in the position. Black keeping the light square bishop. Yeah, I'm pretty comfortably collecting the queen side there. Black does have the two bishops, though. So I'm thinking if I can maybe deprive black of that. The alternative is this b5 move. b5, knight takes e7, and then queen takes d6 if I want to keep my light square bishop on board. It's kind of nice to trade for knights, though. But I can drive this knight to a really bad square, so that's kind of what appeals to me. Like b5, black would have to go to a5, b8, or d8. And none of these moves, none of these squares look great for black. They all look pretty passive. So, yeah, close call. You could argue I should just play one of these now, but still trying to be accurate. Still trying to take into account all the factors in the position. Let's play the b5 move. I'm going to go with that one. But I wouldn't fault anyone for playing bishop takes c6 either. Dealer's choice, I think. I kind of envision my bishop coming back here at some stage too, though. Okay, knight a5. Yeah, and now probably take, and queen takes d6. There is knight c4, but I think I collect on d7. Should be just fine. You know what I also might do? Okay, so let's take here. Black has exactly one move to play. I might play bishop d4 first. That might even be just the cleanest thing of all. Swap that dark square bishop, because this pawn remains weak regardless, right? I probably don't even have to be in a hurry to collect that. This too, though, take here and then bishop d4, looking pretty good. Ah, that's a fun line. Yeah, I see some stuff with knight takes g6 and then queen takes f8. So here, knight c4, knight takes g6. Oh, I see a beautiful... Oh, it's not quite checkmate, though. I was seeing a beautiful mating idea. Okay, I think I'm going to go for queen takes d6. Now that I've spotted the knight takes g6 stuff, this is too fun to pass up. But now there is knight c4 here too, I should mention. Queen takes d7, knight takes e3. But with black just attacking with that knight, as long as I don't blunder a fork, which can be a difficult proposition against knight, as long as I don't blunder a fork, I think it should be good there. Yep, so bishop e6, and I think I'm going to play this one. Yeah. There's a check on c4 again, but king f2, no problem. No problem at all. The rook can't enter the fray easily, can't get to the d file. I'm also covering the c8 square. So let's just neutralize that bishop and set up tactical threats. There we go, knight takes c4. Okay, so yeah, I think this is the move I want to play. Because if black takes with either of the pawns, I have queen takes f8, which is going to be mating. So knight takes g6, king g8 is forced. I wanted to play queen takes f8 there, bishop takes f8, and then I thought knight e7 mate. But the bishop covers the e7 square, unfortunately. So I think how we're going to do this is knight takes g6, check, king g8, knight back to e7, check, king h8, and then just play bishop takes g7. King takes g7, queen d4, check. Black can continue a little bit there, but I don't see much else. Yeah, nice move to play. Check. And I think black will play king g8. It's the only move that prolongs the game. And when someone plays a move like this against you, like generally you're going to see what the idea is. At this rating level. Yeah, I think that's an indication they see what's up. Yeah, so take here. And then checkmate. Thanks for the game. I appreciate it. Always nice to play a viewer. So thank you, Rendika. So yeah, before we click over to the analysis, this is a theoretical line. Maybe I'll go into some of the details just a little bit, look at the database a little bit. This position here, I definitely want to check out if black plays rook a6, what theory and what the Masters games indicate white should do, what the engine likes. I was out of book for move 9. Yeah. So this is a sharp line. Being out of book in this line is tough for both sides. Yeah. I'll reveal to my opponent that I was out of book on move 11. Yeah, so we were both sort of groping our way through the darkness here, trying to find a reasonable path. But yeah, I just don't like that black went big here with the exchange sacrifice. That move was not forced at all. So maybe black overlooked rook a6 as a defense and assumed that bishop e6 coming in, followed by knight c7, if queen e8, by the way. Maybe they assumed that that was something they had to prevent. But I think if you go for this line, you got to play bishop takes b2 and try to grab a pawn. That still wouldn't be easy for white, because I think this queen a5 idea is diffused by c3. And then I'll be curious if the engine likes b4. Again, I missed that black had the c4 square. So if this was more of a committal line and queen a6 was just strong for black, then I'd really be beating myself up for this. But ultimately, I don't think it made that much of a difference. And the eval, I would imagine, is still hugely in my favor. Okay, let's take a look at this. All right, so yeah, knight c6 on move 2. Now, at the top level, it seems like they play bishop b5 with just as much frequency as the d4 move. We're always storing your variations in your browser cache for safekeeping and sharing. Consider making a study. Okay, I've never seen that message before. All right, anyways, let's look at the Masters database. Yeah, so you can see kind of the split here. In the Masters database, historically, d4 is more popular, but bishop b5, this Roslimo variation, which I kind of think of as the Ruy Lopez against the Sicilian in a way. So looking to take the knight and double the pawns. That's pretty popular too, and aligned with its own body of theory and lots of interesting plans. So do check that out. If you remember the 2018 Carlsen Caruana World Championship, that line featured because Magnus was playing the Sveshnikov Sicilian from the black side. So in order to avoid that, Fabiano was looking into the Roslimo in various ways, trying to crack black setup here, which is difficult. I always look at the chat here just to see why can black not take the queen. So yeah, it was pinned at the end, which we will look at. All right, so d4 takes, and the Sveshnikov variation would be if black played knight f6, knight c3, e5. High quality line, one of the best Sicilians out there from the black side. Tons and tons of theory. Again, if you're curious about recent events in this line, I would probably start with the 2018 World Championship, where Magnus used this as a surprise weapon and did very well with the black pieces. Fabiano could not get through that one. But in this game, we have g6. This is the accelerated dragon. There's also the hyper accelerated dragon, which is when you play g6 on move 2. In both cases, white can go for that c4 setup if they want. All right, so here, if we look in the Masters database, c4, the Maroczy bind, popular. I just saw a game in this line the other day at master level. Popular line, bishop g7, bishop e3. There's various move orders. You can also start with knight f6. Sometimes black even throws in knight takes d4, but the gist of this is that white puts pawns on e4 and c4, looking to clamp on d5, which in a lot of lines of the Sicilian, white doesn't have the luxury of choosing that plan because their knight is coming to c3 early on, right? So like in the Sveshnikov, black plays knight f6, attacks the pawn on e4. White doesn't have time to set up the so-called good marriage, right, with c4, knight c3. Due to the threat, they're going to want to play knight c3 right away, which you could argue is less aesthetically pleasing and in some cases a bit of a weaker construction. But I hesitate to make that conclusion overall. It's just a different way of playing. But from what I can tell, these lines in the Sicilian where black does not play an early knight f6 and gives white the option of c4, the top guys, the top players in the world don't seem to fully trust that for black. Same thing in the con variation. It's a little opening detour here, but e6, d4 takes, knight takes a6. The top level, they seem to like this c4 move. I know it's the third most popular move in this position, but the winning percentages are pretty good for white, and it's the same premise. White gets a chance to play c4, knight c3 if they want and grab more space for the middle game. I personally don't mind playing the black side of these positions, but it's not to everyone's liking because they can get cramped compared to a normal open Sicilian. All right, so continuing here, we're going right down the road, the main road of the accelerated dragon. So bishop e3 supporting the knight here, knight f6, bishop c4. A rule that I always keep in mind in dragon formations is don't feel like you have to play f3 as white until black is actually threatening to go knight g4. Okay, because you may regret having played f3 at the expense of a developing move. Because let's say black goes castles here. Yeah, queen d2. White has not played bishop c4, so black can strike in the center with d5. And I think these winning percentages are going to look pretty attractive for black. And I think the engine already is going to say that black's at least equal here. Yeah. So just a consideration, dragon formation, if knight g4 is not actually a threat, the queen is patrolling that square, then don't feel like you have to rush f3. So bishop c4, black castles. Yeah, and bishop b3, top move by a mile here. It is well known. I actually played into this one time when I was very young. I think it was maybe like 15 or 16, and I was playing Andrew Karklins. Andrew Karklins, who's a FIDE master from, I believe, Illinois. Kind of a legendary figure on the American chess circuit. And I played this move as white, and he taught me a lesson that day because he played knight takes e4, and I realized what was up. Knight takes e4, d5. Black scores just fine here. I think in that game, I actually played bishop takes f7 because I saw the center fork trick coming, and then here. But this is also fine for black. And he went on to beat me in that game. I think he expanded in the center and used the two bishops. So that is why white is playing this bishop b3 move in this position. So stepping back. And again, it's known that this knight a5 move is a mistake. And it's interesting that there's so many games from this position. I don't know if we're going to see that Fischer game that I was referring to here. Sometimes that Fischer game is not in the database for some reason, but hey, Hikaru's had this position. But yeah, knight a5 allows e5. And if black were to play the knight to e8, because where's this knight going to go? These squares are all covered. If knight h5, you risk g4, trapping the knight on the edge of the board. So knight e8, white has this beautiful idea, bishop takes f7 check. Black actually managed to draw one game from here. But regardless of how black takes, let's say king takes, knight e6 is coming. Using the pin of the d-pawn. The queen is trapped here. This one I know. I'm not going to miss this. Can't go to c7 or b6. Yeah, remarkably, black actually survived in one of these games and got a draw. But this is winning for white. +7 position. Congratulations, Dan Bogdan, for holding this position in 2008. So if you're curious, you can check that game out in the database. Well, I guess we are now. I think I looked at this game at one point because I was curious how black ended up holding. But yeah, anyways, lots of stuff you can figure out and find in the Masters database. I highly recommend using this as your first resource when you're analyzing what happened in an opening. Just take a look at what the best players in the world historically have done. It's a good starting point. So yeah, and if king takes on e6, by the way, there's a little king hunt, queen d5 check. Black's king gets dragged out here, g4 check. King takes g4, rook g1, and black is not long for this world. Mate in 3. White's going to attack down the g file very quickly here. Already is. Yeah. Line like this is a nice forced checkmate, queen returning to d1 and delivering mate. So I guess there's some games with knight a5, e5, knight takes b3. and black tries to gather a little bit of material. Rook e8. There's some games here. I wouldn't want any, just on sight, I wouldn't want anything to do with this position from the black side because white can scoop this knight whenever they want. Looks dangerous when black has given up that dark square bishop, the sole protector of their king. But black does have the 2 center pawns, so I guess black's mustered a couple draws here as well. So that's a nice little trap to know on this line. Yeah, looks like d6 in this position is the most popular. This transposes to normal dragon waters. White goes f3 because now knight g4 is a threat supported by the bishop, right? So you can play f3 or h3. h3, white often castles kingside. If f3, white perhaps is going to castle queenside, a la a normal dragon, a mainline Yugoslav attack. For example, this position for many, many years was considered a theoretical battleground in the dragon. I think nowadays this is considered to be better for white, but it is possible for black to play this. So that's a different branch, d6, going from an accelerated dragon to the classical dragon. And white has h3 or f3 options. We won't go too deep into there. But yeah, I'd say a5 or this move rook e8. I'm not as familiar with this move. This is an interesting one. I think some resources recommend this move. That's another option. Yeah, I don't feel qualified to fully explain it, but I do know that you try to advance in the center with this. E6 and d5. Like if castles, is that what black plays? Yeah, d5. And the rook, I guess, is handy attacking the bishop on e3 in some cases. If there's a trade here that takes place. Some line like this where black gets play against the center. This almost looks like a d4 opening. White like blockading this square. It's interesting. So that's another option too, rook e8. Looks like some other assorted options. Queen a5. Knight g4 is playable. I shouldn't say that this move is impossible. Sometimes they do this and then deflect white's queen from guarding. But I think this is generally considered a little better for white. Funny little maneuver there. And white playing with bishop and knight versus 2 bishops is actually not so bad for white. They have good play down this file. The option of trading the dark square bishops. So lots of branches here, folks. We're just scratching the surface. But black plays a5. Yeah, and I was debating which line to play here. f3. I know on f3 there's just some extended theory. d5 at this point. White can capture various ways. If you take with the e-pawn, knight b4, black coming up and attacking here. Again, a4 could be thrown in at some point to try to deflect one of the defenders of d5. White has to be careful with the bishop loose. I think I would fail to explain all the ideas if I even tried here, and this is already pretty complicated. So honestly, this is why I kind of like the accelerated dragon and hyper accelerated at the amateur level. I don't have a ton of experience playing it myself, but from the games of students that I've seen and the general like trends at the below 2200, below 2000 level, I think if you prepped a system like this from the black side, which is high quality, you'd probably score pretty well. I mean, know some stuff against the Maroczy, but you'd have a lot of players who are like confused by the fact that black is not moving the D pawn. And that is the primary difference between the classical dragon, the normal dragon, and these accelerated versions or hyper accelerated. Black is not making it clear to white yet. They're not revealing their hand yet if they're going to move the D pawn. And hence why in a lot of these cases, black can shove D5 in one move. We already saw some move order things that white could easily fall into. I mean, if you play this line from the black side, guaranteed you're going to get this at some point with the whole center fork trick idea. So I think there's lots of cool ideas, traps from a position of foundational knowledge to be had in this line. So maybe check it out if you're looking for a Sicilian to play. So back to that branching point, a5. I chose castles. Again, f3 is also an option. a4 too. But in my experience, a4 and allowing the black knight to come here in the future is not the greatest. So castles, black could still play d6, but a4 is consistent. Knight takes a4. If bishop takes a4, by the way, I do believe it allows this move, deflecting the knight from c3. We'd have to calculate if something like this is working out. But I think black takes here. And if we get some knockout scenario, white's pieces are looser than black's at the end, even though white can make the first capture here. This knight in particular is going to be hurting. Yeah, like take, probably we take on a4, and that knight is trapped. Could maybe be temporarily defended, but that doesn't look good. So best to take with the knight here. Knight takes e4, so we're still following hundreds of games in the Masters database. Okay, this is maybe where I was getting the c4 idea, because c4 is played in this position sometimes without knight b5. Interesting. Okay, but then it kind of transposes. So is it possible also the way the game went down? Knight b5. Okay, and this is where black played rook takes a4, which actually has been played 7 times. It's 3.3% of the time in this position. Rook a6. Okay, yeah, c4. C4 was played here, not c3. Yeah, I'd be curious what I would have done here. I don't know. I might have played c4, but what's the gist of this? How does this go? d6, queen e2. Okay. Yeah, these were like moves that were swirling around in my head. Rook d1, line up with the queen. I think I said rook fd1, but I can see why this move makes sense. And just lots of different moves here. Like 7 or 8 different moves here played from the black side. Knight a5, bishop c2, bishop e6, b3. Okay, you kind of rearrange this pawn structure. But you can see the engine starts to tick up in white's favor. So I think the engine does approve of this whole line for white. I mean, plus 0.7, that's nothing to sneeze at. So I'm going to do a little more digging on this line. And if you're curious about this, you can too. But this seems to be one of the more principled ways to meet this whole a5, a4 idea. Stake out a little bit of the center so black can't establish a pawn on d5. Queen e2, line up with the queen. Look for opportunities to pounce here. Maybe bishop c2, b3 later. Yeah, and that's a nice reason to use the a rook, by the way, to get out of range of this bishop. I can see how this comes together. Okay, so black played rook takes a4, bishop takes, and it looks like here everyone who has played this position from the black side plays bishop takes b2. Yeah, grabbing the pawn, including some very strong players. Gawain Jones, a British grandmaster. He's played this position a couple times. Yeah, so he evidently has looked into this. Yeah, it might be playable. This is like a true Sicilian sacrifice of an exchange where you have the 2 center pawns. You have like kind of a compact position. I don't doubt that white is better here. I do definitely believe that. Bishop b3, that's nice because if queen takes, there's bishop f7 winning this. But yeah, white probably has to be very patient here to break down the black position because white's structure is weaker than black's, I'd say. Even though black has an isolated pawn, the A and the C pawns are probably a little weaker. So that appears to be how black should play. And this queen a5 move, yep, we're getting into +3 territory. I played c3. Engine suggesting knight e5 here. Okay, my opponent played d6. All right, and this makes me feel a little bit better. b4, top move of the engine. By the way, I think Lichess did a restart. Usually I have like multiple lines selected. Maybe I can do that. My settings got a little bit messed up with the restart here. But yeah, let's put up 5 lines. So it looks like white's comfortably better with a number of moves here. But okay, b4. And yeah, all these queen moves are possible. I think on queen a8 or queen d8, I probably would have played the rook c1 move again. Because it takes the burden off my pawn on c3 a little bit, and this whole diagonal. I'd maybe look for something like knight c7 to d5, transferring the knight. But yeah, I think I would start with this move. So instead, queen a6. And this is not working right away, right? Queen c4. Still better for white somehow, but the advantage is dropping. Yeah, I didn't want to mess with this. Didn't make much sense. So cool. Rook c1, another top move. We like it. And it looks like bishop d7 is probably definitively the losing move, although black might be losing already. Wants black to go here. So on this, there's some clearance this way maybe. Bishop b3, queen h4. Okay, and the black queen is escaping. But without any pawns to show for the exchange and white not having any weaknesses to have to deal with, this should be winning. Should be winning for white. Yep, so instead, bishop d7, knight c7. Black went for knight takes c3. But again, if queen c4, I was ready with bishop b3, and I think it's a similar result. Yeah, if take here, I think I was mentioning this line. Could have a series of trades where black takes on b4, but only 2 pawns for the rook. Should be easily winning. Knight d5 looks good. a3 looks good. Rook b1, same thing. Yeah, I don't have a whole lot to add here. This is just putting the finishing touches on this game. Attacking the bishop in e7. Yeah, I don't think any of these moves are going to change the evaluation in a meaningful way. Yep, bishop d4. I like the idea of just getting rid of that bishop, just so black doesn't have the bishop tandem. Just cut down on their counterplay. Yep, knight takes g6. And, oh, I was looking over at the chat because someone said, am I missing something? Why can black not take the queen? Yeah, if there was not a bishop on d4, Zor, then queen takes f8 would look really strange. If black could play this move, which with the bishop on d4, black is pinned. Yeah, so I was ready if black played king g8 to play knight e7. That was probably going to be my move. I really wanted this to work, and then knight e7, checkmate, but it's not mate because bishop takes e7. So no mate to be had. I think just repeat, bring the knight to e7, and we've won black's g-pawn, then take queen d4, f5, or bishop e3 next. Too much material. But Randika fell on their sword and allowed this nice mating pattern. Okay, so I think the analysis pretty much matched up exactly with what my feelings were after the game. I got a 98% accuracy in this one. My opponent got an 87% accuracy. I like a 0 mistakes, 0 inaccuracy, 0 blunders game. That's nice. But yeah, again, sometimes you have games like this where you didn't have to make like a truly difficult decision. So I feel like my knowledge of the opening was just a little bit better than my opponents. They admitted they were out of book on move 9, and I knew a couple more moves than that. Black went for this exchange sack, which is apparently playable, but you got to play bishop takes b2. Probably just missed this c3 move, which holds the bishop. All right, hope you guys enjoyed this game and the analysis. Maybe look into the accelerated or hyper-accelerated dragon if you're curious. And let me know what you think. And thanks again, Randika, for the game. All right, take care, everyone.